that again. Okay, so here are some proportions for our stick figure that we can make. And it's all based off of some unit length, which is about the height of a head. Okay, so we can use, I would just use a cylinder in 3ds Max to make a stick person. And it would have like a unit height and just a small diameter or radius. And we can look at the proportions of the body, right? So the shin roughly is going to be 2 head heights or two lengths tall. The femur area, the upper leg, will be 2 also. The back will be, looks like 3 for the whole torso, in other words. So I'll have 3 cylinders. So each one of these is going to be a cylinder, except the shin's going to be 1, the femur is going to be another. The back will have, I think, three segments would be fine, and then 1 segment for the width of the shoulders and half a length for the hip width, and that should, and then well, looking at the arms, that's about 1.5, well, it's actually what, 1 3/4 height for the upper arm from shoulder to arm, and then the elbow probably another 1 3/4, so a little bit longer. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, it does make sense. So it's a little bit shorter than the leg, which makes sense. So sounds good. So this is how I would approach that in 3ds Max. I'll keep this up for reference, but I'll come back here and I'll just make a cylinder. It'd be nice to keep it in a good place, right? So I'll just start at 0 here, or near it, and keep it up to, well, I don't want 1 single unit length, and I have these units, so I'll just use 20 millimeters, like a good, and 1 millimeter in radius. So that's going to be my stick person. Now, if this was supposed to be like an actual size person, then I would treat this accordingly, right? I would be using meters, I guess, instead of millimeters, or at least more than 20 millimeters for a shin, right? So that'll be the shin bone, I suppose, and I'll start with that. Okay, so I'll zero it out, get my move tool, and zero out these dimensions, or the position here, so it's right at 0. And I'll try to build off of it. Okay, probably best, I already know that the pivot point needs to be, if this is the shin, it's going to rotate at the knee, not at the foot, right? The ankle will rotate at the foot, and we'll get to that. So I could either flip this totally around, or I could just move the pivot point up. So I guess that's as easy to do as any. So I'll just type in 20 for the pivot point of, so I affect pivot only, type in 20 for the move, and uncheck that. So now the pivot point is at the top of the cylinder. Are we okay with that? Right? So now when I rotate it, it's going to rotate about the knee portion of the object. So that should work. So I'm going to maximize the front viewport, get my move tool back, and I'll hold the shift key down. I probably do want to name these as I go along. So this is the person's, well, this is going to be to the left side. So that's the right shin, right? So maybe I'll just call that shin right. And I'll hold the shift key, and I'll move that up, and I'll put a little gap in there because I'm going to put spheres in those gaps. Because otherwise, it's just not going to look like it's working. So there, a little bit of gap there, and this is going to be what, the, I don't know, femur or upper leg, thigh. Should we call it thigh? Thigh right, and take out the numbers here. So yeah. There we go. So now I have a shin and a thigh. Probably want to rotate this and shorten it for the hip. Right, so as far as this goes, those are 2 units long, in other words. So 20 millimeters is 2 units, and the hip is going to be half a unit, so that's like 5 units wide, maybe a little longer. I don't know if that's going to. So I'm just going to use the rotate tool with the shift key and rotate it out this way, 90 degrees. I do have my angle snap on, so it can be rotated 90 degrees just right. And this one's going to be named hip right, I guess. That should work. Of course, I'll need to move it and change its height, right? So in this case, half of a unit, so that's a unit is 10, so 5. Oh, and its height, that's interesting. Yes. So I'm going to have to adjust its pivot also and move it to in the X direction 5 units. Yeah. Maybe that's a little short, huh? Well, the other side's going to get... I'll just move it over a little bit more. That should be okay. Okay, so these 3 I should copy over, but I still need some cylinder, some spheres in the middle here. So I'm going to add some spheres to these joints. I think it might be easier to use AutoGrid and just kind of stick it right in the middle there. And just make a joint small enough to cover up the edges of the cylinder, or big enough. And just place it in the middle there. So yeah, the X and the Y are 0, and the Z just matches, 20.5 should be, well, whatever. Then I'll make a copy of that for the hip. Well, that'll be called knee. Knee right. Move that up there. That should be called hip right. I also think a foot would be good, so I'm going to put a foot down there. And actually, I'm going to put it right in the floor. Call it foot right. But this one, I want to make a hemisphere out of it. So put a half sphere. So now it looks more like a foot, sort of. But it's still spherical. Yeah, so I'll stretch that out a little bit, right? So with my, just stretch it out, move it. That looks sort of like a foot. That might work. I will want to make the pivot point pivot at the ankle, so I'll move that pivot point. I'll use my right side view, or my left side view. And I'll put the pivot sort of like right there. Put that down. So when it rotates, it'll rotate sort of like a foot. Should be good. Okay, so I think I have a complete right lower part here. So I'm going to select them all. And mirror them. We haven't used the mirror tool, I don't think yet, but we can use it. And I'm going to use a copy. And I'm going to shift offset this to the right a fair distance here, so I can put a sphere in the middle there. So that should work. So far, so good. Okay, I'll just do the torso and the arms and the neck and head, and then we'll link them together. So another sphere, I'll just use an existing one here for the center. This one I'll just call groin. Zoom in, and I might want to make this one a little larger just because, just slightly larger. This will be part of the back. Maybe all of these should be larger, but anyway, we're good. Okay, as far as the proportions go, the back is just going to use single unit ones and 3 of them, so 10 millimeters in my case. So I'm just going to move that one here and just call that lower back, or back lower. And I'll set the height to 10 and adjust the pivot point, and then I'll make copies of it. Probably should have thought that through before I changed that. That'll work. All right, and then I'll make copies, give a little gap there, and that'll be back mid, perhaps. And then upper back, right? So shift. And actually, come to think of it, I think those should rotate about the lower parts. I'll have to flip those around. I'll just rotate those around. So anyway, yeah, back, up, upper. Okay, so instead of adjusting their pivots, I'll just go ahead and rotate these 180 degrees because I have my angle snap on. And then move them back into place. That way, because they do need to rotate about the other way. All right. So, looks all right. I think I can copy maybe these for the shoulders. Well, yeah, I don't know where the pivot points are for that. Oh, they're in the right place. So yeah, I can just change their heights. Alt, undo those. Okay, so I'll just copy those. So this will be the shoulder, and I'll maybe want to make those shoulders a little bit, and I'll rename those. So I'll set the height of the shoulders a little bit more. Well, to 10. And I'll have to move it to where it kind of matches. There we go. Do the same thing over here. Should have done it the other way. There. So now I have, and I'll put some joints down here, and we'll name them later. Okay, so now I have some back joints, and the proportions should be okay. Looks sort of proportional, I suppose. And then the arms are 1.5 instead of 2 links high. So I'll make copies this way as well. And just place it. Set the height to 15. And move it and adjust the pivot. Make another one for the upper arm. So make 2 copies here. And that'll be a hand. But I could use something else for a hand or a sphere, but we'll leave it that way for now. All right, Looking pretty tidy, I suppose. So again, mirror, right? So I can mirror this entire structure here. Except for these two because they're already mirrored. So just these guys. Copy. All right. So all that's needed is a neck and a head. So the neck doesn't need to be as tall as this, so just put it right there and change the height to maybe 5. Yeah, that should be okay. Could even have it pivot about that sphere instead, which would be even better. Okay, all it needs is a head. I might want to save, well, I'll go through and rename them and save, but I want to import that head we had made earlier. So that's just a simple matter of import, merge. Yes, import and merge. And there's the head. It may be at a different scale, but, and I didn't even name it, so. Yeah, I think it's at a little bit different scale, but it should work. Just kidding. Probably won't work until I scale it way down, so scale that. Problem with animating linked objects when they've been scaled is it doesn't work very well. So we're going to reset the scale in a minute. So kind of want the head to be about the same size as, just like the proportion says, the head's about 1 unit. This is a little bit bigger still, so scale. That's about right. Okay. Okay, maybe that's a little bit too small now. And I need to rotate it 90 degrees. And also want to adjust the pivot so that it can pivot about its neck. Well, yeah, it can tilt also in regards to that. So there we go. Okay, that's a bit small, I think, but should be okay. All right, now we're ready to, I'll pause and let everybody get to that point. I do want to save at this point, so I don't have a good name for him yet, so I'll just say stick guy. Okay, so we'll pause here and we'll try to get answer. Just keep in mind that what you link with the link tool, maybe I'll just use the front view here, starts with the child object or what follows the following object. So with the select and link tool, for instance, I would want to link the foot to the shin, right? Not the shin to the foot. And then the shin to the knee. And the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone. Right? So as I link those in, and basically everything, I think probably if you use the groin as the stopping point, so everything is linked to the groin. Now, I could have done this before I mirrored it, which would have been okay too, but just to get some practice. I'll show you the end result here. Okay, and then the hand, so I'll stop at the groin, and then the hand goes to the arm goes to the elbow, elbow, upper arm, shoulder, clavicle, and then the mid-sphere, whatever that is called. And then that should go, this should follow the back down, I think. However you want. It may look a little weird when you animate it, so you can change that. But that's going to stop at the groin also. And I'll show you why. I'll just go real quick here. And pay attention to how it highlights it, because if you click on the wrong object, you may link it to itself or miss that link. But we can test that as well. And then the head basically goes to the neck, and the neck to this, and then it's done. Right? So the only other thing you would do is, the only thing that gets moved is the groin. So I can, see, if everything follows that groin object, then I've got it all linked anyway, and then I can test a few things with the rotate tool, such as moving an arm. I could rotate the mid-back, if I can zoom in on it. And so we can rotate these things. What else? So really, if you just use the spheres as the objects you rotate, then it's a little easier to keep track of your animation. You can even constrain the animation not to hyperextend his knee, so he doesn't need an ACL surgery or something. So here you go. And if I rotate this, the whole head and shoulders happens, right? So there is one object here, like the neck. If I just want to move his head, that would work too. So I think I got it. So real quickly, so at least we can check the reference video after I post it and stuff. So okay, so we'll stop there.